your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for being with us here on the program as we are set to have a returning guest with us here on the program from Neomasculinity Solutions. My very good friend here, I consider him such because of the conversation we had last time. John Krotec is my guest. Krotec, I beg your pardon, visionary, entrepreneur, speaker, and founder of Neomasculinity Solutions. Hey, welcome back. We're going to have a great conversation today.
Well, thank you for having me back, Doc. You know, every time you read that introduction, I feel like I'm the king flying in, right? But thank you for making me feel special. But more importantly, I'm here to have an interesting conversation like the last time we talked, and we are good friends. And hopefully your audience will be able to walk away with something of high value. So thanks for having me come back.
You bet. Folks, he is, of course, a U.S. Army veteran, a serial entrepreneur, an author, a speaker, founder of, as I mentioned, the Neomasculinity Solutions. It's a global brand and self-autonomy movement dedicated to helping leaders of all backgrounds, both men and women, reclaim purpose, life through truth, and lead with clarity. And boy, we could sure use that today. And I speak from the position or from the point of view of leading with clarity, because a lot of our leaders, and I remember someone actually did this. They got a transcript, or maybe they used AI to transcribe a speech by a particular politician, for example, who you'd consider a leader, you know, you'd like to think. And they read it themselves. And it made no sense. It just was like all over the board. And I'm going, there's no clarity there. We don't know what you're talking about. And why did you talk about this over here when it has nothing to do with the reason why you were invited here to talk to us? It's like you coming on here wanting to talk about neo-masculinity, and all of a sudden you're talking about Disneyland and the Mariana Trench, and like, John, where are you coming from? But we're going to go with clarity. And the clarity is going to start because you were just sharing with me before we started about these educational curricula, both college and high school, which there's some things that I remember from high school, for example, and it's what got me. I have these little pet peeves when it comes to English, the English language and so forth.
Right.
You and we're sitting here talking. I never introduce myself as, hey, welcome to Tell Me Your Story. This is Richard Dugan. No, I am, because I'm speaking both to you as well as to others. And then when it comes to phone numbers, for example, Tell me where there's an O on the keypad. We have 805. When I grew up in Phoenix, it was 802. But people love, because it's easier, incorrect, but easier to say 805, 602. And it's like, but that's not right. Because what if, John, you had a phone number that actually spelled something out alphabetically on the keypad, like your name, JOHN. Well, would I say J0HN? I mean, it's just a pet peeve of mine. And I got into this business 46 years ago to raise the bar. And it gets harder and harder just to keep it where it's.
Well, it goes,
Doing-
there's so many idiosyncrasies with
Yeah.
English language is tough, the Australian version of English, with all of their slang, they got a dictionary just on their slang words and how they
Yeah.
use it. But we've entered an age, we've talked about this before, and the reason
Mhm.
why we're working on the projects we're working on is because there is this general lack of clarity or this lack of focus. And it seems like, and you and I are very similar in ages, mid 60s, but it
Mhm.
seems like we did more with less coming along through corporate life or military life. And then
Mhm.
now we've got less, it seems, or we got more, but we're doing less. And I hear it all the time from people, I can't get focused. That wasn't clear, like you just pointed out. And I see
Mhm.
we see the team that I'm working with, we see this high level of frustration and anger and division. There's people, when have we ever seen America or the planet for this matter this divided? I mean, we
Yeah.
weren't around in World War II, but
Sure.
we talk about curricula. One of the things that we're doing with neomasculinity is or dot solutions is we've got some solutions. And one thing that we're doing, we have a project called the Brainery. We train brains, not grains. And what it is, it's a reignition of intuition. We've written these curricula. The PhD college one is done. It's in formatting now. We've finished the high school curricula, and then we're going to work on middle school and elementary, and we're going to reintroduce scientific method, which is critical thought. We're going to we're going to reignite the intuition part of it. But we're also going to talk and we're going to focus a little bit on gender roles and not identities, gender roles,
Right.
what the vintage identities or the vintage roles were for each sex,
Hmm.
male, female. So
Right.
I don't, people are talking about it, but we're actually introducing it into a curricula. And we don't think anybody's got anything like it right now. And so it's going to be revolutionary in a sense because it's been compiled, it's new,
Yeah.
but the wisdom in it and the information is not necessarily new. It's just
Right.
repackaged and reintroduced in a way
Mhm.
that allows for some more enthusiasm and excitement. Um, in fact, you'll see very soon, maybe this Monday, we have a mini course, and it's called Brain Freeze. The breaking of how's it go? Breaking the ice on critical thinking. It's finished. It's all AI created. We gave it the information, but AI created the mini course, and
Mhm.
it's on number one, what you just mentioned, Doc, clarity. What
Mhm.
is clarity and how we lose clear or how we use it in our day-to-day living. The second one is intuition, what it is and why we have to pay attention to it. If we don't hear something that matches up with what we know is true, then we got to kind of take a look at it. And then the last one is influence. What is
Mm.
influence? Who
Mm.
are these influencers? Who are the
Yeah.
influencers that divide people? Who are the influencers that bring people together? So we're really excited about that. And we've got some twists and turns in the mini course, but it's going to capture your attention and perhaps you can actually walk away with some reliable information for a change.
Yeah.
But and also we've got 4 mini courses that are in development, not mini courses, master classes, if you will. I'm learning all these new, they've been around, but so we've got 4 of them. We'll have one on healing trauma, We'll have one on leadership. We'll have one on military transition, and we'll have one on information analysis. How what that means and how we're bombarded with so much information, most of it not reliable.
Hmm.
We've identified the fact that there's reliable information here, and then there's four or five other types of information, from misinformation to disinformation to malinformation, noisy information, and now AI information. We've got five types of information that's not necessarily the truth.
Hmm.
And then we've got the truth. So we're working on we have the Sentinel handbook that came out a couple of months ago, but an eighth grader can understand it. And we give people skill sets to start questioning the things that they're seeing and hearing. So it is a global movement. We're seeing not what's going on in America, but we're seeing it everywhere. And
John, hmm.
yeah, go ahead.
All right. John Krotec's my guest. We're talking about, of course, his organization. Website is, of course, Neomasculinity Solutions. As we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Masculinity, it's been termed toxic masculinity in some circles, but that's not what we're talking about. And I think I mentioned this in our last conversation, John Krotec, that Tim Allen, for example, in his comedy back in the 80s and 90s, talked about guy things, doing things that guys like to do and getting together with guys. And a lot of, yeah, exactly. And how people, those who were criticizing him because he was anti-woman, and obviously they did not hear what he said. They heard what they wanted to hear, because he's talking about how, well, look, the gals get together for girls' night out, whatever that is, whatever they choose to do. Why can't guys do the same thing? And some would say, well, yeah, but they always go to the bars, they're watching football, they're doing this and that all the time. No, they're not, because there are those of us who are out there, we're working, we're trying to earn a living to put food on the table, et cetera, et cetera. And he's just talking about how we need to have some time together with other guys. I had a men's group back in 1993, back in Phoenix. And initially, we sat around the picnic table in my backyard, where I and my wife lived, and we would talk about stuff we would read from Robert Bly's book, Iron John. And then we decided to take it to a new level, and we started to, on the weekend, we would go hiking. And we'd put together a backpack, which I invariably, I don't know how I got picked, invariably carried. I was the one carrying the backpack. But that was okay because of some of the experiences that we had. We even went once hiking in the pouring rain, and it was fantastic. Oh, it was so cool. We actually crossed this one stream where it was knee high, and we went up the side, and we went here and there and everywhere to the top of a waterfall. Then when we came back to that same stream, it was waist high. It had risen because of the rains, but it was such an incredible experience. These two gentlemen and I getting together in different parts of the Valley of the Sun, and we even went out to the Superstition Mountains, and just spent some time together talking about what was meaningful to us. And I know that's part of what you are all about in terms of helping. For example, one subject here is the holistic healing for men, resilient recovery from sexual trauma. And what is TBIs?
Yeah, that's a traumatic brain injury, and
Okay.
I was gifted with one of those back in 2012 in an automobile accident, and it made my challenges a little bit more interesting. But
Mhm.
what it did was it helped to shake loose a dark, dirty secret that I had kept hidden for 40 plus years. But
Mm.
but but to back up, there's nothing like a walk in the woods. And
Yeah,
I totally agree with you. And for anybody listening, and the real guys know this, we don't just get together and drink beer and watch football and oogle over women.
right.
There are some sophisticated men out there, I would like to think, that
Hmm.
talk about other things and that bond in different ways. And
Right.
as a matter of fact, when we first started hearing the word toxic with the word masculinity, it kind of it caught me off guard. They started to associate those two words together, and then when they were talking about how being masculine was somehow a detriment to society, I thought, what's this all about? Why
Yeah.
are you trying to emasculate men? So we did a deep dive on masculinity and we found out some interesting things, Doc. We
Hmm.
found out that there are some traditional, we'd like to say vintage roles that go way back since the beginning of recorded time. What
Right.
is it that men do primarily? What's their mission in life? What's their purpose? And how does that look? And what we found in just about every single culture on the planet was a man's primary role was to protect his family and his loved ones, people in his village or in his wherever, from threats. And I think we might have touched base on or talked about
A
that.
little bit.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, but the threats have evolved. So
Yeah.
why talk about toxic masculinity? Why do the powers that be in these narratives, why would you want to emasculate men? Well, in ancient times, when an army beat another army, they would make eunuchs out of these guys. They would snip them, and they were no longer guys. They were guys biologically, but they weren't complete.
Right.
And so it was to get rid of the resistance
Mm.
to anything that would befall that tribe again. So if we take away a man's resistance and he can't protect his family and his purpose is gone, then we're wide open for mass manipulation. And I often wondered why it's portrayed that the Muslim men in certain countries are just out of control. Why are they so angry? Why are they so this? Why are they we see it?
Mhm.
And we have a belief that it's because their purpose for centuries has been taken away. They're no longer in a position to protect their families like they had at one time if you do the research. And now we've got oppression and totalitarianism and all of these things that push men down, and they can't live their purpose.
Yeah.
It gets deep, and people, we can debate it, but the
Sure.
reality is men, take for instance, not gender identity, but gender role. You're a single mom.
Right.
You're divorced for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. You're raising children on your own. As a woman, you're going to have to take on some male roles, like protecting your family from threats and other things that men would do if they were in the picture. And it's the same thing for single fathers that have kids. They're going to have to take on vintage female roles. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that the guy wants to be a woman or the woman wants to be a
Right.
guy.
Right.
It's just fulfilling a role.
Right.
And
Yeah.
those are what we need to get back to. Men need to start resisting. And I don't mean revolutionary and blood and all this. I mean, we just need to reject stuff.
Right. I would
No.
actually change
Yeah.
that term, toxic masculinity. Get rid of the masculinity part. How about this? Toxic machismo, because I think that's really what they are talking about. Who are using the term? Period. I would rather they not use the term at all. But I think it's this macho, gotta do this stuff and be this and behave in a particular way. I had an experience with some wonderful gentlemen who actually were from Mexico, and they came up to the radio station I was working for in Phoenix, and they wanted to do an overnight music program in Spanish. Okay, well, they would come into the station, which was out in the middle of a field, all right, on a 7-acre piece of property with the tower and the transmitter. But they would come out there in suits, a suit and tie. Who does that, right? And I remember talking with one of my coworkers who I found out, and I got my comeuppance on this when I made the comment that she was from Mexico, and she stared me down and says, "No, my family is from Spain." Anyway, she explained to me that them coming in with the bravado as I perceived it at the time, and the suit and tie and so forth. She says, that's not arrogance. That's confidence. And there's a big difference. And they were the nicest gentlemen you would ever want to meet. I had a great experience with these gentlemen when they came in to do their program. But it was that initial observation. And then I was given an education. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I was, because these gentlemen were just that. They were gentlemen. And it had nothing to do with where they were from. It was just the way I perceived them, specifically because of they walked in, with their chest out and their head held high and the suit and the tie and looking sharp. I want to tell you. I hope I look that sharp in a suit and tie one day.
Well, you probably do, but it's first impressions can say a lot, but
Yeah,
also what you just said, there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. And I think sometimes confident men do intimidate people. They're not being, arrogant to be proud of who they are and what they do, and,
right,
and have a little bit of, we can call it anything we want. We can word, Smith all day long.
right,
But the word toxic, for instance, right? And they associate it with masculinity lately.
right.
Think of us, we're in a situation where there's a threat. There's four of us, two couples, we're both sitting there having lunch, and there's a threat. And somebody comes up to our table and flips the table over, right?
Hmm.
And insults our wives. Who's going to stand up? Who's going to get toxic? The women? Or is it going to be you and me, Doc? Are we going to, reactionary? We want to
Sure.
take a deep breath. The violence is the last resort,
Hmm.
but it's going to be the men primarily who are going to stick up for the people they care about.
Exactly.
And if you want to call that toxic, then so be it. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that he's a misogynist and he's going to go home and beat his wife. It
Right.
just means he's reacting to a certain situation. So to blanket all masculinity as toxic is just
Yeah.
ridiculous. And
Yeah.
I have to reject it. It's not true. It's not even in the least bit true, because if all men were toxic, every time we got out of the house, you and I would get in a fight with somebody.
This
That's
is
just the way
true.
testosterone works.
That
So,
is true.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
And the ancient philosophers, the Stoics, the
Hmm.
Stoicism guys,
Hmm.
Marcus Aurelius and, a bunch of guys that were like way up there in brain power, they said perhaps the greatest skill set that any of us, not just masculine men, but the ladies listening too, there's a little short period of time before stimulus or trigger,
Hmm.
and before what you do,
The
right?
response. Yeah.
The response. So if anybody just took a nanosecond when you get triggered over something that, just take a second to think about what's going on. Some things are immediate, you have to take care of, but in general, most things that we get triggered by, we have some time to think about how we're going to react.
Hmm.
So imagine if everybody on earth right now, all the people that are sensible and listening to your show, Doc, just take 10 seconds every time they get angry or frustrated
Hmm.
about something. Just take 10 seconds, take a deep breath, walk away, go to the woods, and find out, if we could just learn these things. And
Yeah.
and we can, perhaps one of the best books I ever read, was the Amy Vanderbilt Book of Etiquette, the complete Book of Etiquette,
Hmm.
right? There's
Hmm.
been some additions to it.
Yeah.
But imagine, we talk about suits and ties and hats. Back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and even into the early 50s, that's what men wore.
Yeah.
They wore, there's a dignity about them,
That's
right?
right. That's
And
right.
then women, oh my gosh, God bless women, the life bringers of the entire universe. They would wear dresses that would accentuate their
Hmm.
femininity. And I'm not saying they had to have their breast all, I mean, those dresses were sharp
Yeah.
and dignified.
Yeah.
And you go in
Yeah.
any thrift shop, you see the old hats from the 40s and 50s. Those women looked good in
Yeah.
those
They
hats
did.
and dresses. And like you said, those Mexican guys coming in for your show, they looked sharp.
Yes, they did.
Imagine if every day we went outside, Doc, instead of putting on just something like this, that I actually did put on a button-down collar and a tie. I mean, don't have to necessarily wear a jacket, but imagine if we just went outdoors and looked sharp every day when we interacted out in public. People
Yeah.
would look at you differently, and you'd feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, when we used to travel, airplanes, for example, you got dressed up because it was a special occasion. You were traveling by means that maybe you traveled a lot, but you wanted to give off a particular vibe, if you will, by saying, "Hey, I'm important. I'm not more important than you. I'm just saying I'm important. What I'm doing is important, and that's why I am dressed the way I am to show that." To show that to people, not to lord it over anybody. It's just to say, hey, I'm a businessman or a woman, what have you. And nowadays, it's if you're lucky, you'll see flip flops, shorts, and a tank top.
well,
On a
somebody
note,
gets upset about what we're wearing. Think about that, Doc, and
Oh
you make a
yeah,
good point. But imagine
yeah.
if somebody gets upset about what we're wearing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oh, look at that guy. Who the heck does he think he is
Mm-hmm.
wearing that jacket and that suit and whatever he's got on? Maybe the same goes for the other way too, that, not to look down, and we never do when we're humble people.
Yeah.
But, I think there's something to be said for looking smart and dignified and confident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wish
It's
more people would do it.
it's funny. I have been wearing not the same clothes, but the same style for the last, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years. I have these nice brown slip-on leather shoes, blue jeans, which are nice looking. They fit right. I made sure of that. And then a black t-shirt like I'm wearing right now. But then when it gets cold out, I will have a different long sleeve shirt on, and then probably have my father's vest on. And that's kind of like my uniform. That's what I wear every time I come down the hill. My wife gets a little perturbed sometimes, and yet she's the one that suggested that I look good when I go out.
Sometimes we can't win.
Sometimes, but it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go down and get a carton of milk at the store. So I need to get my jeans and my shirt and da da. Well, why don't you just go down in the shorts that you're wearing, right? As because I would rather wear the jeans because I would feel more comfortable, and it's not about anything having to do with modesty by any means. It's just that I just feel comfortable doing that. And it's been very nice. We're, by the way, talking with John Krotec, and we're talking about the work that he is doing through his website, through the work that he has created and his Neomasculinity Solutions. And the website is with a dot between those two, neomasculinity.solutions. And we are here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, along with John Krotec, and I wanted to ask you about something here that I find fascinating here, because we sort of brought it up just a moment ago. This aspect of humble intelligence and unlocking your cells, decoding your DNA to radiate your unique mental, emotional, and spiritual talents. Now, you and I can sit here and say humbly, not from the ego, I'm good at what I do, and I'm not ashamed of that. It's okay to say I'm good at what I do. If you were going in for an interview, they're going to ask you, so what are your strong suits or, your talents? Well, you darn well better know what they are, because you're not going to get the job if you don't know what your talents are. And yet it's fascinating how it's so easy for us to say, oh, I'm not good at this, and I'm not, because it's so self-deprecating. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
And like,
absolutely.
especially with us guys, and I've gotten out of that habit because I just don't go there. It isn't that I try to bolster myself the other direction. It's just a question of I'm good at this, and I'm good at that, and that, and that, and that, and that. And I've also found, John, and I don't know about you, you probably have received the criticism, the critiques, if you will, that say you're not good at this and that. As a matter of fact, I received an email not long ago. And I'll share the whole story with you outside the program. But I got this email basically saying I was the worst, the worst, the worst, wearing that stupid hat. And then the final comment that was made in the email, just another anti-Semite. Now, first of all, how the heck do you know what my beliefs are in regards to other religions? I have to tell you that my favorite guests on this program from a philosophical perspective, and I've had several on, rabbis. I know at least intellectually, I know where they come from in terms of their education. The conversations that we have are so freaking deep. It's just incredible. And that's taking nothing away from you or any of my other guests. It's just that there's something about Judaism that I really, really like. I like the aspect, for example, of the tree of life or the Kabbalah, however you choose to pronounce it, and the stories from the Torah and the rituals, traditions, and ceremonies within Judaism, whether it's your bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or any of the other things, because obviously growing up Catholic, I also love the ritual and the ceremony, the traditions that my family and I had as a kid growing up. Then the other aspect of it was anti-Semite. What are you talking about? And someone said to me when I shared this with them, they said, "Oh, they must really have hurt you." And I said, "You know what? They didn't, because I didn't own what they were saying. I actually took it to another level and I said, they must be going through something that they would attack me like that. And they would have attacked someone else. It's just that I came along at the right time for them. But I don't own what they said. I'm not anti Semitic, and I don't wear a stupid hat, and I'm not the worst. I don't know where I stand on the scale, and it doesn't really matter because there are always going to be people who are better than us and worse than us. I mean, it's just the way it works, And hopefully, I can teach those who aren't as good what I know, and they can become better. And I can learn from those who have a higher talent level than I. I can learn from them and bring my game up too. It's about a collaboration in that respect rather than competition. But what about this aspect, especially when it comes to, since we've been talking about masculinity here, what does that initially do to a guy who gets criticized after doing whatever it is that they do for years and years and years, and they know they're good at it, and so forth and so on, and then somebody just comes along and tries to kick their legs right out from under them?
There's a lot to unpack here. The first thing is, a long time ago, I was told by somebody who I really admired. They said, if you never have anything good to say about anybody,
Mm-hmm.
don't say it. Rule number one. So people that make snap judgments and say ridiculous things that aren't true tells me one thing. They don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
So why would anybody in your position or me, if it's a fair criticism and it's true,
Mm-hmm.
it's something to consider.
Right.
But there's no reason to empower a person that is spewing lies because they're not true and somebody who doesn't know you. I don't, and listen, it's easier said than done because
True.
there's always that little ego person or whatever it is right here, right?
Yeah.
This one, the good ego, the bad ego, right? And so you're kind of seething maybe but the reality is we don't seethe anymore. We listen to what they say, we know it's not true, and we do nothing, and it's hard to do. We do nothing to empower them. I personally wouldn't even respond to a person like that.
Oh, and I have not.
Good man. So so somewhere along the line in your experience in life, you've learned that you don't need to empower people like that.
Mm-mm.
When I was in cognitive behavioral therapy to work on my own issues, I was told that there's people walking around with this huge ball of something that just smells bad in their pockets, right? And they're just looking. There's a scripture about lions, devouring things. But these people walk around and they think because you're the light, they think that they're going to dim that light. And the
Mm.
reality is they don't even know what they're up against. They have no idea. And I'm not saying that we're, you know, Spartans, but
Right.
but if we just follow the light and what's in our heart and we know what's going on, we pay no attention to those people. Now, when I was 25, it was a different story. I'm no saint. I've been in some tussles with people, but that was all pecking order, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and it leads me into something else that you talked about with Judaism. Quite frankly, Satanism, And, the black arts aside, I really am intrigued and interested in all spiritual ceremonial
Mm-hmm.
activities.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, when we were in Guatemala, I saw some interesting things in a little town called Chichicastenango with idols and a mix of Christianity and something else. And then and even all of these plant medicine people, these shamans that live in the jungles, and people go down there for treatment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ancients used to believe that when people have become traumatized or having a struggle dealing with something, it's because their soul or what makes them who they are has disconnected from their physical being, right? And so these shamans, the investigation, really good book out there called Storming Heaven about plant medicines and they spend their entire lives or professions to help people find to integrate again, to become one again, which takes, it's self-actualization, self-agency, self-responsibility. And until we take those things, until we're responsible for our own actions, you're going to continue to get people like that make negative comments and rude statements about a person that they don't even know. It
Mm-hmm.
shows me without that they're having a bad day. They're
Yeah.
feeling small about something. Um, which leads me into something that I was talking to a lady several years ago who had been bullied growing up because of her weight. Very attractive woman, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And she was working on a um, project to help young girls primarily to get over bullying when they're being ridiculed about their weight. And we were talking, we were having lunch somewhere in a popular place and watching the traffic, and it was a good conversation. And something dawned on me just about people when we were talking about people like you talking about that guy. I literally came up with this thing that I call the human galaxy theory, HGT.
Mm-hmm.
Not the human growth, whatever, but
Right.
anyhow, and when I made it very simple. There's a black hole galaxy that goes around the universe and sucks in the light, and there's no form to it. It's so dense, it can suck a whole galaxy into it. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's and we can talk about what that blame and shame and guilt game is all about and why people become black holes and become miserable like that guy probably. And then there's this thing called the spiral galaxy. And a spiral galaxy, if you look them up, it's got a center mass of light, and then it's got these spiraling arms.
Mm-hmm.
It's reaching out. It's going through space and it's gathering information and it's thinking and it's trying to improve itself. It's not sucking energy out of anybody. In fact, you could see spiral galaxies intersect and go through each other. It takes years, billions of years, they say. And then there's a galaxy that's not really, you can't find this in a picture book on astronomy, but I call it the contributory galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Contributory galaxy, what is that? That's somebody who's actually thriving. They're not in despair. That's that guy wearing the suit. They're not in despair. They're actually not trying, they're not just surviving and they're not just learning. They're actually giving back. So a contributory galaxy person is somebody that is full of love. And not the creepy kind of love. I'm talking about the love that emanates from somewhere in your core being where you have self-love. Doesn't mean you're all about yourself and an egotist,
Yeah.
but once you can have self-love in a smart way, in an intelligent way, and you forgive yourself for any mistakes which we'll continue to make, then you start giving back. Take you, for instance, whatever you've done in your life somehow has led you to the radio and has given you this opportunity to share stories which help people. I would say there's a certain that's a certain category of love. It's
Mm.
over the airwaves, but you're giving back. I would say, Doc, that you're more of a contributory galaxy guy, right?
Mm.
And I think I'm kind of getting there too, but and not to categorize. I just want to keep it simple. So if you're spinning in this blame, shame, guilt black hole, you're not getting any better. You're just sucking the life force out of everything around you. It's like walking into a room and feeling like you've been sucker punched when you meet somebody for the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But there's a frequency. There's a human frequency that scientists have come up with. They don't know how they did it, but they did, where there's actually a vibrational state based on emotions. And so if you're in the guilt, frustration, anger, blame game, and you're just spinning, you lack a human emotion that you need in order to live your life to its fullest. And it's very easy. It's hard to find sometimes in today's world, in any world, but it's courage. It's the human emotion of courage to look at yourself in the mirror,
Mm.
or maybe you have a prayer circle out back where you pray to God, but you say, I've got to turn this around. I can't live my life like this anymore. And that's called courage.
Mhm.
Once you step off into that world of courage, things start to happen. You raise your vibrational state, you start to attract interesting people. People want to hang with you. They don't want to isolate from you because you're just an ordinary old codger. And you start to learn. And
Yeah.
that road to self-actualization, and you know this, it is not, it's a challenge. I'm not going to even say not easy. It's a challenge to be humble and to admit that you've done that you need to change for the better.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like that story I told you earlier about pulling into the parking lot here at the radio station. And first of all, I did see the gentleman. I saw his car, right? And so I swung a little wide so that I could pull into the driveway and then into the parking place. And the next thing I know, he's pulling up next to me and telling me that I almost hit him. And of course, my first thought was, why were you sitting out on the street? For what reason were you doing that? Not that it really matters. But even you made the comment after I shared the story as well, you didn't hit the guy. And I did not. I did not. But apparently I put a scare into him. Obviously I was going fast enough for him that it kind of rocked his boat a little bit. And I actually felt I didn't feel so great for the next hour or two after that, thinking, oh man, this guy's going to be in the building. I'll be walking past him. So I actually went up to the counter and he was working behind the counter on the computer. And I walked up there and says, look, I'm very sorry. I apologize for coming so close to you and so forth. And I'll try not to have that happen again. Now, the other side of it is, statistically speaking, I have worked in this building, pulled into this parking lot from February 2024 to the present. That's almost a year and a half. And that's the first time that has happened. So of all of the times I've pulled in here over and over and over again, this is the first time. So by percentages, boy, that's a tiny little thing there. But again, it's all about perception. And I find that that's interesting too. But that's one of those situations for me where I've got to clean this up, in a manner of speaking, cleaning it up from the standpoint that at least he recognizes that I'm taking responsibility for my actions. All right. I'm not necessarily saying I did anything wrong. I'm just saying that I'll do my best not to, come that close to you or anybody else, coming into the parking lot, that kind of thing. And that's one of the other things too that I think that we could talk a little bit about, and that is sometimes, especially us guys, in order to tamp down the energy, if you will, to bring it down from the stratosphere, we'll own something that is not ours. We will take responsibility for something that isn't ours. We didn't. I've got several examples in my life where I got called on the carpet and, as the phrase goes, reamed a new one for something I knew I didn't do. And it took some days before I was actually able to voice that, saying, look, this is what I did, and here's the reason behind what I did, which in these circumstances nullifies all of the energy that was expended by, say, a supervisor screaming and yelling and so forth for me having done something they thought I had done. Uh, but do you ever find that that's the case in order for us to sort of have keep peace in the family, in the company, in the workplace, or wherever? Sometimes we will acquiesce and say, ah, yeah, I did it, even though you know you didn't, just to diffuse the tension and the aggression, if you will, and the energy.
It's situational. It's a great question and a great example. I think the guy in the pickup or the vehicle that pulled up next to you all upset was probably in the wrong place where he should have been, and he was just startled,
Hmm.
or he wasn't expecting somebody to just maybe come into the parking lot like that. But whatever, we all act differently in different situations, and if he didn't get hit, so the mere fact that he took some time to come over and say, "You almost hit me," you
Mm-hmm.
know, right there, he just disempowered himself as a man.
Yeah.
That's a small person to do that. And I can say that because you told me exactly what happened.
Hmm.
If you had hit him, completely different story.
Completely
But
different. Yeah.
so I don't think, again, I think that as far as acquiescing, I don't think that I would ever take responsibility. Maybe I can't say never. I can never say never. I don't know. I've never admitted to doing something that I haven't done.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting question. I've never had anybody ask me that before. Would you accept something that somebody, I don't
Yeah.
know, because I think that what happens is that people that would do that, that would blame you for something that they don't know really who did it. But
Yeah.
people that would do that anyways is kind of like that guy. Why would you do something that
Yeah.
doesn't hold any virtue?
Yeah.
And I can't blame if you don't know for a fact,
Yeah.
don't accuse anybody of anything. And
Yeah.
you, if you didn't do it, I think and I'm saying this rhetorically, I would
Hmm.
just say that no answer is the best answer.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. All right, or in a meek way like that, don't, provoke and whatever you say, George, just say, okay,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's not true. You didn't do it.
Yeah.
Just like that guy. I mean, the 30-year-old John probably would have gotten up in his face and say, well, I didn't, but I'm going to hit
Yeah.
you now. You know, I'm just don't go out and
I
do
know. I
that.
know. Yeah.
Don't try that. But I think that life is a learning process each
Oh
and
yeah.
every day. Every
Absolutely.
single person we meet.
Absolutely.
And I heard this one time. I don't know if it's true statistically, but I heard that, in general, a person, whatever they're doing, whatever company they do, whatever startup, whatever thing they support, a third of the people, you probably have heard this maybe, I don't know, but a third of the people are absolutely going to love you. Doc, I love you, and everything that you do is gold to us. We will promote you any way we can. I
Right.
just like you and I like what you do, and those people are great. And then there's about a third of the people who don't care about you. They don't like what you do. In fact, they probably hate you because of something in their own mind.
Hmm.
And then there's a third of the people that really don't care. Either
Right.
way, they're neutral, not neutered. They're neutral. So think about this, but here's what happens. It's human nature because we want to be approved and accepted.
Right.
We spend most of our energy trying to impress, and I'm just using the word impress, or
Hmm.
trying to look good in those people that don't care either way or that hate you anyways. But we spend all of our quality energy on those people when we ought to take a deep breath, spend a nanosecond of some contemplation. And we should be I don't, that word, but we need to be spending more time developing and nurturing our relationships with the people that really care about us. And that's not to say that you might not become best buddies with that guy that came up in your face, because things like that happen. People think about it, they contemplate, well, maybe I was kind of rough on that guy. If that guy is a big, if he's got any kind of virtue about him, he'll come up and he'll search you out and he'll apologize. I didn't mean to get on you like that, but you scared the heck out of me, and I was startled.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is he honest enough with himself? And I'm not passing judgment, it's a question.
Yeah.
Is he honest enough with himself to accept his role in that
Yeah.
interaction? Because it takes two to tango.
Absolutely.
He
My
may have been,
father,
yeah,
yeah, my father, I would consider a very great man because a year before his passing, I was at their house, my mother and father's townhouse, following my eldest sister's memorial.
right.
And I was making up the couch because my brother got there before I did and got the second bedroom, which is okay, which is just fine. Anyway, I'm there making up the couch. And my father walks into the room. Now, he was walking into the room because about 2 hours earlier, when I returned with several other of the relatives to their townhouse, he asked the table where we were sitting, he asked us, where's your brother Mike? Where's Mike? My brother. And my brother's always the one who tells the jokes, no matter how, how strange or bizarre they are. He's always telling the jokes. And I thought, oh, I'll be cute. And back then the gas prices were a little high in that respect. And I said, well, Dad, I'm sorry to tell you, but we had to sell him in order to put gas in the car. My father did not like that at all. He came back angrily with, when I ask a question, I want an answer. And I apologized for being cute. And I said, he decided to stay over at Mary's house, my sister. He's coming back later with somebody else. And then he walked off. So there we are in the living room. I'm making up the couch for sleep. And he walks in and he looks at me. And I'm having to look down now because as he's gotten into his 90s, he kind of shrunk a little bit. And I said, Dad, he says, I want to apologize for being upset earlier. And I said, Dad, I love you and we are okay. And you will always be my father. And then we hugged. I hugged him very gently. I didn't want to break him. And then he walked off and went to bed. And I tell that story a lot on this program because it's significant to me because it shows my father's willingness to own his behavior. He's responsible for himself and he owns it and he makes sure that people know that, yeah, back there I was upset for whatever the reason is. Hey, I'm sorry about that. I take responsibility and I hope we're okay and that kind of thing. And that's something I learned from him as I was a kid growing up too. And my sisters at his memorial said basically that he was the most honest guy they ever knew. Now, I always knew my dad was honest, but I didn't see him obviously the same way they did, at least by making that kind of a statement. But I thought that was pretty cool. And I considered him to be a real man. I mean, he took care of us. He provided for us. He always made sure before we went on trips that he went over the car to make sure we had plenty of oil and water and this and that and the other and making sure it's all safe for this long vacation we're taking for a week going to California or San Diego, what have you. And in spite of the fact that he used to say that he didn't know, he felt that my mother had more to do with our upbringing than he did. It took me a couple of years after his passing to realize that what he meant by that statement wasn't to put himself down, but to raise my mother up. Whereas before, I thought he was putting himself down because he didn't think he was there enough to have any influence on us. And at his memorial, the theme could have been, Dad, we are who we are because you were in our lives. And
Well, that's old school. Your dad sounds a lot like my dad.
yeah.
Old school mentality, treated my mom like a queen,
Mhm.
taught us value, work ethic. We weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination. And there was always, and you hear it all the time, it sounds so cliche. We had clothes, we had shoes, we had fillings put in our teeth. We'd get a visit to the doctor if we got sick and they couldn't handle it at home. We got through school. 2 out of 4 kids graduated from college. We all graduated from high school, and
Mhm.
and that's just the way it was. And my dad
Yeah.
was probably like your dad. You wouldn't see him in the morning. You'd see an empty coffee cup, And then you'd see him at night, at 6 o'clock, right before supper. He'd be
Right.
gone all day.
Yeah.
And it kills me when people think that, there was some kind of with this word privilege. My dad worked a couple of jobs, and when my mom could work, she worked. And
Hmm.
they were working, my dad was working 80, 90-hour work weeks when
Oh,
corporations did that to you.
wow.
And for 40 years.
Hmm.
So don't, and we can talk, you get what you give in life.
That's right.
And your dad gave all for your mom and for you kids. And
Hmm.
for that in and of itself is what, they would call a mensch. My dad used to use that word, a true man, a real man.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
out there. There's probably more real men than there are toxic men out there. And let me tell you, we need to be hanging out with those guys. Those are the guys
Yes.
that we can learn from because we know those are the guys that care about their kids. They care about their families. They don't believe in lies, and they're there for you when you need them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Before we wrap
So
things up, I want to go into another subject. We could go on all of these subjects for a while. I want to talk about this concept, and I call it a concept because and I'm thankful you're putting together these curricula. Um, this aspect of critical thinking, why the gray matter, the convergence. I love this, John. The convergence of intuition, instinct, due diligence, and my favorite, a logical reasoning right from home. It says in the Old Testament, let us sit down and what? Reason together. Reason together. We're not doing that. You mentioned earlier in the program that you would think there were these tools online, the social media that would actually bring us together, but it has nothing to do with reasoning together, unfortunately. Let's talk a little bit about the first element here in regards to this convergence, starting with intuition, which we promote all the time about going within and listening to that still small voice when it comes to critical thinking, John.
well, thank you for that. And and the greatest gift every human being is blessed with when we come onto this earth, and then it progresses as we get older, is the human brain. It's the most sophisticated device. The number of synapses that it does and what it actually does. It's an amazing thing in the entire universe that we've been blessed with. But even more so, when we talk about reasoning together, what all the ancient philosophers were always wondering, what is truth? Where is it? What does it mean? How do we find it? But the freedom, okay, of critical thinking. So we have this brain and we have the freedom to actually use it as a device for the betterment of our own lives, but also for those loved ones around us and for all mankind, if we thought like that, humankind, right? So there's convergence, there's coherence, there's all these things, especially in the digital age, that we've gotten away from. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them is, and we've talked about it a couple of times, is intuition. What is intuition? Intuition is the bells and whistles, and you'll get it in our brain freeze course. Intuition is the bells and whistles biologically put into your body and in your head that tells you something's not right or it's something you need to take a closer look at.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about when we say these curriculum, it's called the brainery. We've got elementary school, and we've got middle school and high school, and then advanced course, college, university. And what we're doing is we're reintroducing that critical thinking, those skill sets back into the human organism. And
Mm.
we would love to, especially with the Task Force Zen project down the road. That's a global healing platform that's never been seen before. And we're working on that too. But if everybody just took, we talked about this and joked about it, but if we ever took a nanosecond to think about a news story that we hear or a narrative that's being told or just that guy trying to make you upset, and it's a good thing you actually were the bigger guy, right? And even went and apologized. If we just, some advice to the listeners today, take a nanosecond before you make comments about who voted for who or who did this or who did that or why this person or that person. Just take a nanosecond to think. Be nice.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be rude,
Mm-hmm.
but just think. And if more people use their brains instead of allowing these electric devices do it for us,
Mm-hmm.
AI is a great thing. We're working with AI, but AI only works based on the input that we put into it. And so we're doing some amazing things in AI. I was kind of skeptical being old school, but the AI has done some amazing things for our company, and it's nothing to be scared of. I mean, aren't we human beings, the highest order of animals on the planet, and we're supposed to be the nurturers, and we're supposed to look over God's kingdom. Isn't that who we are?
Mm-hmm.
Why have we
Yeah.
walked away from that commission? Why?
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
become intellectually lazy. We don't want to take the time to drive down to the library or go online and look something up to do the research there ourselves.
Yeah, and
Come
I
on.
myself, I'd rather go to the library rather than online, simply because there are times when it is sketchy as to what you're getting. Now, if you know the authors, and let's say you want to go back and read Thomas Aurelius or Plato or whoever, all right, you could find those online, maybe even in Audible. It'd be great if they had recorded them themselves, but
Exactly. Yeah.
it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Let's talk a little bit about instinct in combination, obviously, with intuition. What about this aspect of instinct, which we see in animals all the time? Certain things that they do are just instinctual. What aspects of the human being are instinctual as you see it?
It's a great question. I always wondered, how does a dog's born? Some of them have hair when they're born, but how does a dog all of a sudden get up one day and just walk? Wow, that thing's
Yeah.
got four legs and a tail too, and it's just walking around now. We couldn't even get up a few days ago.
Hmm.
So, we talk about instinct. Now, with humans, we have instincts, and we also have the thing we just talked about, the brain.
Hmm.
And when the brain starts to overanalyze our instincts, for instance, let's just take the greatest bioweapon on the face of the planet, human hormones, right?
Yeah.
Do we have a handle on those? I mean, look,
Yeah.
not that pornography is proliferated, human trafficking. It tells me that human beings do not have a handle on that bioweapon. And so we've allowed our instincts, and I'm saying this in a rhetorical way because the humankind in whole, and just look around at all the debauchery and all the crazy stuff going on, we have not gotten a handle on our instincts, not even on our intuition anymore. And we've allowed certain forces, you know, without going woo woo or getting into some type of conspiracy, because we all know who we are, right? And what we do and behind closed doors. But we've allowed our instincts and intuition to basically run amok.
Yeah.
And we talk about going down to the library. I love the library, but pulling Plato off the shelf and reading what those guys were going through, and nothing's really changed that much. There's still a lot of guys like you and me and many of your listeners who want some reliable information. They want to hear what other guys and gals have done to get through whatever challenges they're faced with. So you as an example of your radio show, if we can just set the example, all you men out there, if you could just set the example, and even the guy that came up to you, if he's listening, if you could just take a nanosecond to think about our behaviors based on the things that are stimulus for us or triggering us or we come across, think about how much better the world would be if we used the brain and critical thinking. And everybody's talking about it, Doc. We don't
Yeah.
see, that's why we didn't pick a .com. We picked a .solutions because we're actually we're not just talking about stuff. We're actually building programs that when they hit, quite honestly, our team believes we are literally going to change the paradigm.
Mm.
And we're going to reignite intuition on a global scale. And isn't that what God, the greatest power in the universe, would want us to
Yeah.
take the treasure here of
Mhm.
our humanness
Hmm.
and our earth and take care of it.
Yeah. I
Have you
love,
ever heard of John Trudell?
no, doesn't sound familiar. No,
I think he's Lakota Sioux. He passed away. He was a poet and an artist, and he had some amazing philosophical viewpoints on humanity and what humanity means. And if you ever get you listeners out there, look up John Trudell. John Trudell did a song. It was called "Bombs Over Baghdad." He did it like 15 years before the Gulf War even started. Listen to some of his
that
lyrics.
actually that song sounds familiar to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyhow, the reason why I bring him up is because there are human beings out there. I'm not putting them on a Christ level,
Hmm.
but there are human beings out there that are way beyond. They're flying at 50,000 feet,
Yeah.
and most of us are down on the tarmac wondering when do we board the plane. And so sometimes we don't even understand them because their
Uh,
messaging is
hmm.
so beyond what we're even thinking about. And the
Yeah.
people on my team even say, John, you need to cool it, man. So we have to tone everything down, we're told, but why? Why do we have to
It's,
keep treating people like 6-year-olds?
yeah. Yeah.
Aren't we adults?
Yeah, it raises that old proverbial question to our leaders and our powers that be, who say, "Well, we can't tell you this because you can't handle it." Like that line from the movie with Nicholson and Cruz. You can't handle the truth. I disagree. I believe we can handle the truth if we were just told the truth about whatever it is that we're talking about, which leads into this aspect of due diligence. And I've had a couple of experiences just recently. Number one, with some gentleman who contacted me telling me that my book would that he could help me to get it to the major publishers where I could get $150,000 to maybe $400,000 upfront money, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And I'm thinking, look, if you want to pursue that, sure, go ahead and pursue that, as long as it doesn't cost me anything. Well, then one day, and it started very early in the morning, 6 in the morning local time. I got up and my mind was racing with all the stuff that's going on, right? I should have taken time to meditate and clear that out, but I hadn't done that. And I get the phone call from the same gentleman who, again, wants to move forward. And I was a combination of a feeling of overwhelm and annoyance on his by him. And I said, look, you know what? No, forget about it. Never mind. I'm not going to do it. Now, I had passed on his information that he had sent me to another good friend of mine who I talk with every week on a regular basis. I sent it to him saying, hey, what do you think? And he loves to do the research on stuff. And he emailed me back a couple of days. No, actually, he emailed me that morning after the conversation I'd had with this gentleman. And he said, I can't find this person anywhere. I can't find any information online about this fella. Don't do anything. It's a scam. Well, I would say that maybe my intuition, along with my aggravation and frustration, took me in the right direction where I said, forget about it. I want nothing to do, because I've gotten these calls before about my book saying, oh, this would make a great movie. How do you figure that? There are no characters in it. What are you talking about? Maybe it would be maybe it would be along the lines of what the bleep are we doing here, that kind of thing. But nonetheless, so even though I didn't personally do the research, I passed this on to my friend who did that due diligence, passed it back to me. And I find that we are unwilling to do that kind of research. Sometimes, and this is why people get caught up in a lot of these scams in particular, is because they refuse to stop. It's like you said, stop for a nanosecond and ask some questions. Ask questions. Even if, in my case, if it was on the phone with this gentleman, great. If it's possible to do a research of them online, even better. But that does seem to be a bugaboo with us. Is that, I mean, I want to believe what I read. I want to trust people. I don't want to go into a newfound relationship distrusting someone until they give me reason to trust them. there was a beautiful scene in one of the Star Trek Next Generation episodes where Riker and Data were talking. And the episode was interlaced with this whole aspect of trusting. So this final scene where he's talking with Riker, he says, "So is it better not to trust so you don't get taken or get hurt or what have you?" And he says, "No, it isn't better not to trust, because 90% of the time your trust is worth giving. And it's rare that you're going to find someone you can't trust."
Well, that, it's like the whole,
Please.
yeah, well, I'm thinking about NDAs, or what is it? Non-disclosure
Yeah,
agreements. And
yeah.
I can remember back in the day when you would shake your hand with a guy in business and it would be done.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to worry like the trust issue. You didn't have to worry about something being stolen or whatever, or being taken advantage of. It happened, but it was a lot less rare. It was a lot more rare than I think
Yeah,
it is today.
yeah.
So you raise a good point. All right, everybody's done a term paper, right? If you
Mhm.
graduated from high school or been through college and higher levels of education, you've done a term paper. And I can remember walking into some of those junior and senior classes in college, and you'd get the syllabus, and the first thing you said, your head would go like this, and you'd go, term paper. And it's a 4,000 level course, so you can't just turn something in that's duck soup. You got to
Right,
give them a recipe, right?
right,
So
right.
so I'm and I say this with candidness and honesty, like beyond anything. I had the best teachers, and I was in public school system coming along. I went to a state university, but I had the best teachers. Some of those English teachers, Mrs. Butler, my senior year, was phenomenal.
Mm,
The Iliad, and but they taught us how to practice due diligence. And like you said, you love the library. We learned how to use the library and where to get things.
catalog,
Yeah, oh yeah. And
decimal system.
oh my gosh, IBID and EBID and all these things. We were, but my point is that we were, this generation, my generation, your generation, if we paid attention, we had due diligence, and especially in our studies, pounded into us.
Mm.
And so we've coined, and you've heard this, intellectual laziness.
Hmm.
Let somebody else do it. And you know what? It's been said that if you hear a lie long enough and loud enough,
That's right.
human nature, I had a quote here from a book, that human nature will believe the lie. It's human nature.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
if you don't do your own research and you hear something that doesn't sound quite right, but everybody else believes it, and you just go with the flow, you are lazy.
hmm, hmm,
You're abusing the gift that God gave you. You're
yeah,
abusing the gift of the freedom of critical thought. And why would anybody listen to you?
exactly.
So we see these influencers, God bless each and every one of them. Everybody's trying to make a living. But
Sure.
you see people giving information that's unreliable or has absolutely no value at all. And I'm like, we spend more time listening to that. And I'm saying that I turn that stuff off. But
Yeah,
people spend more time listening to nonsense and people that haven't given due diligence to what they're saying. And no wonder we're where we're at, and why companies like ours are going to come on strong, and why radio shows like yours, the listenership goes up, because people want something that they can rely on, that they can
yeah,
trust.
yeah,
And I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't lie to you. If you ask me a question, I'm not going to lie to you.
yeah,
This is how it went down. Perception's one thing,
yeah,
but I can assure you, uh, well, I could open up some worms here, but I can assure you that there is an absolute truth with every issue
yeah.
that's out
Well,
there.
and my friend Dr. Sky, Steve Cates, and I, who do a program every Monday morning on the station, it's called Skyview, where we talk about astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. And when we get into these subjects, depending upon whatever it is, he will, if he does not know, he will say, "I don't know, but I can look into it." And he always makes the statement. He says, "Look, if I don't know something, I'm not going to make it up. I'm going to tell you that I don't know." And to me, it's important for us to recognize what we know and don't know. One of the things that I do know is this concept of logical reasoning. I believe that's what I was doing when I was working for the religious station back in Phoenix in the 80s and early 90s. And I was asking these different questions of a more spiritual nature about what it was that they were talking about on the radio and so forth. And the questions that I asked got answers that made absolutely no sense to me. It just didn't click in my head. As a matter of fact, at one point, one of these programmers actually said to me, says, I don't believe you're saved. I don't think you're ready to meet God. And my first thought was, wait a minute, didn't you just say on the program that this is a personal relationship between me and my God? So what business is it of yours in that respect?
Yeah.
And then they would tell me to go read the writings of the founding fathers of the faith, to which I had two more questions. Who set them up as the founding fathers? Number one. Number two, since I had never heard of any of these people they're referring to, does that elevate me to their level because I'm asking the same questions that they were? Now, again, that comes from a place of humility as of making that statement, because I don't have all the answers and I've never claimed to. But then I would go researching in other areas. And I think it was one of the funniest things. I remember asking one of the leaders of the Baha'i faith while I was a part of their group for about a year and a half. I says, well, I know you want me to read this book and that book and the other book of the founding father, as well as others who have written of the Baha'i faith. But, what about all these other books that I would really like to read? And they said, well, first of all, I would tell you that they'll probably lead you right back here. However, go ahead, read anything and everything that you can. And I thought, wow, okay, that's interesting. That they were beautiful people, and they were very honest about their faith and their belief and so forth. I was only there for a year and a half, and I made a departure, and it was funny, the departure that I made with them, because I had taken a letter to the rectory of the church I was raised in, the Catholic Church. And I said, I'd like to be removed from the rolls of the church. You know what their response was? They took my letter and they said, we'll put it in your file, to which I came back with, you and the FBI have a file on me? But when I told this one guy from the Baha'i faith that I just couldn't make that final step that I'm being asked to make, she says, that's fine, and we will remove you from the rolls. It's fine, and you can come back whenever you'd like. And I thought, wow, okay, thank you very much. That's the way all of these philosophies should be. Let me search where I want to search, and if it leads me back to you, wonderful. And I've learned something in the process. So it's very cool, and that to me is part of this process.
No, and thanks for sharing that. What that points out, and this is true. Your conclusion is whoever you are, wherever you are, whoever's listening, it's your life.
Mm-hmm.
You live it the way you want to live it. If somebody's going to pass judgment on you, then that's on them.
Mm-hmm.
You be you, right? And there's a challenge that I'd have for audience. Listen to when you see a show or a newsreel and you see maybe in social media a politician saying something, voicing a narrative or talking about an issue. And the same goes with people that are in some of the churches. Listen to them. We've been told to test the spirits, right?
Right.
So if we're testing the spirits, why don't we investigate what they say? Why don't we just take what they're saying, hook, line, and sinker?
Yeah.
Because you might start following something or believing something that could hurt you in the long run. And if you'd only taken a little bit of time to practice due diligence, you may save yourself from trouble down the road.
Yeah.
And I also think not everybody's a reader, but you say you like to read, but also, it's great advice. You don't have to go bonkers, but read a book every now and then.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff out there to read. And if you like coffee table books with Van Goghs or Picassos, get one of those and just flip through it. expand your mind. We're not here for that long in
Yeah.
this realm. So spend it wisely. Spend your time wisely. Lower, you said this earlier, Doc, lower the energy level.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, walk outside, turn off the computer, the TV, whatever you're doing, and just look at the magnificence. Unless I guess you
Yeah.
live in downtown Chicago, but just look at the magnificence around you.
Yeah.
We have a lot to be happy about.
Yeah.
Even, when I say that now, but I mean, I got run over by a car a year and a half ago,
Ow.
and it hasn't been the same since. And I could have been really an ornery, nasty person, but it happens.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we can all, changes happen all the time.
Yeah. And even if you're living in Chicago and you go outside and you don't see direct Mother Nature, if you look at the structures around you,
Mm.
consider how the individuals created in their minds, in their imaginations, the God-given brain that they were giving that has that imagination part in it, and how they formulated what now you are looking at. I mean, it may not be quote unquote the natural world, but it came out of a human being and others who built it. Uh, to me, there's a magnificence in that. Now, my druthers rather look at a tree. Okay. But if you don't have one around you, look at the magnificence that man has created through the gift of life they've been given by the creator.
Well, that's what you're saying. There's magnificence in everything. There's
Yeah.
beauty all around us. Now, I
Yes.
don't know if, downtown Kyiv after a missile attack, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah.
There's some levity there and it's not funny, but we do have, and that's what we're saying is take some time to notice things outside of yourself and in a positive way.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but always be inward. When I think about self-discovery and self-agency and self-actualization and what a journey it is. I'm thinking about things now that I didn't think about a year ago or 10
Hmm.
years ago or 20 years ago. And
Wow.
and the word is think.
Yeah.
Just think
Hmm.
about your life and how you want to live it, barring that you're not living it to hurt somebody. But and don't listen to um not the soothsayers, the doomsayers. Don't listen to them.
Oh, yeah.
You can do
Oh,
anything you want.
yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean that you have license to go out and create havoc and riot, but you can be a contributor, a contributory galaxy.
Yeah.
If you're in that black hole, reach down, find the courage. I'm not going to say grab them, I could, but reach down, find the courage to make your life something better.
Yeah,
And why
exactly.
not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, you may not have heard it first here, but you heard it from John Krotec, who is a visionary entrepreneur, a speaker, and founder of Neomasculinity Solutions. That's the website we'll be linked to as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. John Krotec, I want to thank you once again for being on the program. I wonder if we might do a third program focusing on the curricula in terms of education that you are creating that is going to make a difference. I mean, here's my bottom line. I don't even know what the criterion is yet. And yet you have chosen to take on that mantle, if you will, because that's not an easy task to come up with an educational system from, we'll say, kindergarten through post-secondary that is going to provide them with much of what we have talked about here on the program.
And yes, and thank you for that, Doc, and thank you for allowing me to share, some time with you and with your audience, your
Mm-hmm.
listeners, viewers, because they mean a lot too, and we can only affect you if you're listening. So
True.
we're glad that you're here. But when it comes to the curricula, and it didn't take us long to figure out that the world's not thinking. All we have to do is turn on any new,
Yes,
and people are
hallelujah.
not thinking. And it's very basic stuff. None of the things that we've put together is new information. You mentioned it earlier in the show,
Hmm.
but what is new is the way that we've configured it and the way we're going to deliver it. And think about that. Think about a unified program. It's not going to be the same school, but think about starting and teaching kindergartners and middle schoolers is a lot different from teaching high schoolers and a lot. So it's been a learning experience for us. The college curricula or curriculum is beyond anything. It is really good. It's 9 modules and it takes a lot of effort. Typical college course,
Hmm.
but you know, so that's what we're going to do. We would love to see. I'm sure that there's going to be some some forces that are going against thinking, but we would love to see our curricula in schools all over the world. Of course, tailored
Absolutely.
for the particular cultures and religions and things, but the reality is everybody has a capacity to critically think.
Oh,
And
yeah.
somebody asked me the other day, you know, is it open to anybody? And I said, absolutely. We've all got a brain, right? We don't discriminate and we don't pass judgment on the way you live your life. We just want you to live it in a better way. And the only way you're ever going to get out of your black hole galaxy state and become a spiral galaxy and even a contributor is if you get out of that.
Yeah,
Nobody is going to do it for you. You got to do it
exactly.
and just do it.
And it is one curriculum, if you will.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there are others out there who are trying to accomplish the same thing by raising the bar. I've been trying to do that for 46 years, doing this program or interviews like this, and that has been my goal. And I'm hoping that through the work that you're doing and others, that we can actually raise the bar and educate and have our population not just locally in the states, but globally, go through these processes of using their intuition and instinct and due diligence and logical reasoning to meet the challenges that we have today and the challenges that we don't even know about yet of tomorrow. So thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome. We have it in 9 languages, by the way, that little Sentinel handbook. It's PDF right now, and we've got it in all the major languages of the planet, and it's written for an eighth grader. It's just a little primer, an
Wonderful.
introduction. Yeah. And so, but there's other things we're coming out with, and we just appreciate it's so good to see you again, Doc, and keep me posted on what you're doing, you know, in the
Oh,
future.
definitely.
And then
Definitely.
we'll get on the next show and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll have a lot more information about the other things that we're doing. But
Yeah.
right now, it's curricula and it's just trying to help people improve their lives to embrace their sex, embrace
Yeah.
their gender, and
Hmm.
then work to improve your life, but work to help those around you and to keep them
Absolutely.
safe from threats.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to ask you those three questions that I ask all of my guests. I asked you the last time, but I'll ask those of you in just a moment. First, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. following the news. Streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you'll subscribe and click notification as well. We also ask that if you can maybe give us a tip. We do have a tip jar, believe it or not. It's called PayPal, and we ask you to support us in that fashion if you can. We also ask that you go pick up a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, and it's available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle with Audible soon to be released. And then we ask that you spend some time, we've talked about it on the program today, going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listening to that still, small voice. With all of that, we go to our final three questions for our very special guest, a returning guest, actually, and we'll ask that of him. The first question is, John, who is John Krotec?
Wow. I mean, I think you did ask me that before. He's a
Mm-hmm.
guy that wants to learn about the world around him and to use my experience to help others through their own experiences. Um, I'm a human.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a genuine, authentic human. And genuine, authentic humans help other genuine, authentic humans, and even some that aren't so authentic. But that's what I am.
Yeah, we help to raise people up. What gets you up in the morning?
Gosh, I think my mind has changed since the last time I was on here. What gets me up in the morning? Any opportunity to improve my life or improve the lives of others without overstepping boundaries. And that just gets me up. I want to be effective. I want to leave something that people can use to live a better life. And, especially people that are dealing with traumas that they might not want to talk about. But those kind of people inspire me because I know where their head's at, and you're going to have to reach out and you're going to have to see what other people are doing, but you can do it.
Yeah. And finally, what was your best day?
I've had so many good days. Today was my best day. Being on your show was my best day because I'm getting stronger and stronger every day. My legs getting better, but this was my best day.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love Talal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.